All right, rolling along here on this Thursday on the show, talking a little football, talking a little recruiting, talking a little Fran Brown, getting into more of that stuff. Man, we never talk about this stuff this time of the year. We've never had really any reason to, and yet here we are. Yesterday was the Under Armour All-American game down in Orlando. King Joseph Edwards, Orange Signee, played in that game. Read a nice article by the tag team of Manny Navarro and Grace Rayner on The Athletic earlier today about a bunch of the recruits that were down in Orlando to play in that game. Lots of interesting stuff in there as we welcome in Manny Navarro to the show. Manny, thanks for hopping on. And man, I want to start with this NIL stuff in there. You asked a lot of the guys, and they were able to give you information kind of like off the record, right, on how much, or not off the record, but without their name attached, of how much money they were making on this. How fascinating was that to you to talk NIL with these high school kids and find out the numbers that are actually out there?
Yeah, I think, when I pitched my editors on going down or driving up to Orlando, I'm based out of Miami. I said, listen, I'm just going to drive in and out and try to get some real answers out of these guys, because I feel like, we talk about NIL, but we don't really, get down to the nitty gritty, like what's really being offered to some of these guys, because they talk about it, they get in trouble with the NCAA, the inducement, yada, yada, yada. So it was fun. Grace and I talked about 20, 25 kids, asked them a variety of questions regarding NIL, and a lot of the same stuff a year ago. I went and I did this too a year ago, and a lot of the same answers as far as money amounts. I think some of the best players are commanding a few $100,000 a year from some of the top programs. But, just the way the NIL is used to sway guys, hey, we'll throw in an extra $50,000 or an extra $75,000 if you flip your commitment, we'll pay you $40,000 a month to help us recruit other kids. That's the kind of stuff that's going on. And I know for many, many years, people accuse the SEC and other programs of doing this. Granted, we saw what happened at SMU years back. But now that it's all quote unquote legal, it feels like it's a topic you can broach with people as long as they don't have their names attached to it.
Yeah, and it's just wild, because it's when you hear these numbers and you hear all these rumors, you just never have any idea. But when you actually get to talk to the kids like that, you get a better sense of what's going on. And Manny, you said you've done this now 2 years in a row. Have you started to? Do you sense any consensus now from these conversations over 2 years of, the actual price range, how many of these kids are getting it to go to school? Or are you getting a sense of consistency on this over a 2-year period?
Yeah, again, I think the best players, as far as the top recruits, they are commanding a couple $100,000 per year. I think, I had one running back a year ago, who told me that he got offered $1 million at the last minute by someone to flip. I don't know if that was over 3 years or just, $1 million sort of signing bonus. But I think, we're in the hundreds of thousands of dollars range. I think quarterbacks and really special linemen, et cetera, those guys could maybe command $1 million or $2 million. But for the most part, it's $100,000, anywhere from like $80,000 to $100,000, I think, for some of the top players in the country.
Yeah, it's wild. And, we're talking about this stuff in Syracuse. I would not have been talking to you last year, Manny, because we didn't have any guys in these games. And now Fran Brown has shown up, head coach in a month, and all of a sudden, we're paying attention to this stuff. How much are you noticing here in years of late, and I guess because of NIL, that is there a wider representation of, schools these kids are committed to, with the direct tie to NIL, or because things are maybe spreading out a little bit more?
Yeah, I think so. I certainly think, first of all, NIL's been around now for a few years, and so schools and programs have been able to really sort of get a grasp on it, right, as far as how much money they need to raise. I think it was Ryan Day who said, a couple years ago that you probably need between $10 and $15 million to run an elite Power 5 type roster. I don't know that everybody's putting together, a $10 to $15 million payroll, but certainly there's enough money to go around. I think to get, again, the best players, to get them paid, and to get some of the lesser guys that aren't necessarily as high profile, something to make them happy, something to keep them content, something to help pay to get their parents to fly in for games if they live out of town. So I think that, we certainly established some level of I don't want to say salary cap, but certainly a budget, right, to be able to run a college roster. I think a lot of colleges have gotten to that point, and I think the wealth is spreading because ultimately, some of these guys talked about getting the same kind of offers, from multiple schools. So there's sort of a going rate, and then at that point, that allows them to pick which coach they like the most or which program they think they can get on the field fastest. And so that's really what it's about for a lot of these guys now.
That's what I kind of noticed with a lot of the answers you had there in the article is that, I don't want to say it was a lot of them, but you'd think almost that, all of these guys just picked top dollar, right? And not that they're getting nothing, but it felt like a lot of guys, I don't know if discount is the right word, but a lot of guys maybe stuck with, the school they actually wanted to go to or the coach they actually wanted to pay for, even if it wasn't, the absolute top of what they were being offered by their suitors.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the majority of the guys, I only had one of the kids, and I ended up speaking to about 15 of them myself. Grace did like about another 7 to 10. But of the 15 that I talked to, I only had one kid tell me that the school he signed with gave him the best NIL deal. So everybody talked about leaving some measure of money on the board, whether it was a signing bonus, whether it was, more money over the 3 years. I think the majority all said that they ultimately picked the school. And I'll tell you what, it kind of echoes some of the conversations I've had with college head coaches over the last couple of years. I remember Rhett Lashley told me just about a month ago, we talked about NIL, and he said, if you're not at least in the ballpark, you're out of the game. So I think as long as you're in the ballpark for what's being offered these guys, you've got a chance to sign them.
I'm curious too, Manny, because we're spending a lot of time here talking about Kyle McCord, and he's transferring here from Ohio State. And this is a whole different ballgame, and obviously it may be even harder to find this stuff out with portal guys. I don't know. Do you have any sense of the money, what the money is like out there for the guys you were talking to, incoming high school players versus portal transfer guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think the majority of the money that NIL raises is for both, the elite high school recruits and the elite transfers. A proven guy like Kyle McCord, who was a starter at a major Power 5 program and a winner. Let's face it, he won at Ohio State. I know he lost one game, but he was a good quarterback. I got to imagine that somewhere in the price tag of $1 million, right, is what he could probably command on the market. And ultimately, he's got to make the decision. Do I want to take the most money, or do I want to sign with a school where I can get on the field and help my NFL draft stock? And my conversations with guys who've been in the portal, the majority of them tell me, I want to make the NFL. I want to be a first-round pick. I'm going to the place where I can get on the field for sure and have an opportunity to shine brightest. And so I think that sort of takes precedence maybe over a kid coming out of high school who says, hey, I want to go to an Alabama or a Georgia where I know the facilities are the best, and I know that I'm going to get the best coaching, and I'm going to get paid pretty well too. I think once you get to become a transfer like a Kyle McCord and you're in your third or fourth year, it's all about getting to the NFL. And so I think that's where you see a little bit of a variance, a little bit of a difference as far as what the players are looking for. Yeah,
now we're getting to the point here, Manny, where it's going to be wild. Like these players will have been recruited out of high school with NIL, which some of these portal guys were not, young enough for that, and then transferring again with NIL. So they'll kind of go through this thing twice. And I guess this hadn't really occurred to me until you said it. You've mentioned, I saw it in your article, you mentioned a couple times here, the idea of a 3-year contract, which means these guys are all getting a 3-year contract with the idea of that's when they're going to the NFL after 3 years. Like, how much is that playing in where you're signing a deal for multiple years? Obviously the portal's in play. Like, how many guys have you talked to? Like, you got to end up in some weird situations with these long-term contracts like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard deals that are just 1 or 2 years. I've heard deals are, contingent on, not transferring, that there's ways for the NIL groups to recoup some of the money that they agreed to pay if you decide to transfer. I mean, there's all kind of stipulations on the contract, but I think the majority of the high school guys, the guys who were top 100 type players or All-Americans, et cetera, they're looking to sign 3-year deals where, hey, I know, I'm part of a 3-year plan. And I'll tell you, a lot of the college coaches, that's what they pitch. It's not about, hey, come here, you get a great education and you'll graduate and yada, 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 yada. It's, hey, we're going to help you get to the NFL in 3 years, which is what you really want. And that's the kind of language they use when they're trying to recruit these guys.
Yeah, you talk about the school in the press conferences. You talk about the NFL in the living room when you're recruiting these kids a lot. Manny Navarro from The Athletic is with us. I was reading a couple of the other stuff you guys had out there. A lot of recruiting coverage on The Athletic. Right now I saw Fran Brown's name pop up more than once. I know you shouted out Jalen Hornsby, a guy that Fran flipped from Texas A&M up here, I'm sure with the help of Elijah Robinson. What are the vibes in the universe you're getting right now in the recruiting scene when it comes to Fran and Syracuse making waves here in the last month?
Yeah, I spoke to a couple of kids who talked about Fran up in Orlando and just said, he's the kind of guy that they'd go play for, if they weren't already locked in with a Georgia or an Alabama or somebody like that. I think part of the challenge Syracuse always faces is getting kids to want to go up there and live in the cold, right? Well, I think in some instances they're going to be able to overcome that. They'll be able to get some kids now maybe that they weren't in the ball game for, because Fran has the respect of a lot of, especially the defensive backs and receivers and guys that he was around quite a bit on the recruiting trail. So I think I think Syracuse is definitely looking up. I think obviously hiring Elijah Robinson was huge. He's a guy who I think really bonds well with a lot of these edge rushers and defensive linemen and linemen in general. It's been my experience over the years talking to them about Elijah and the job that he does. So I think Syracuse is in a really good position here over the next couple of years. They can keep that staff together and maybe win a few games with Kyle McCord to start attracting some bigger recruits and some better recruiting classes.
Yeah, Manny, you're down in Miami. You cover the Canes, you cover the ACC. You know this league, and obviously the college football playoff is changing next year and expanding. Kyle McCord was we were playing back some cuts of it earlier on a podcast the other day, talking about part of the recruiting pitch was come to Syracuse, have a chance to go to the playoff. It's wild for us to hear because we're not used to it. How much do you think that's going to play into schools in recruiting now? Expanded playoff, that like legit more schools are going to be able to say that to kids with a straight face that you can come here and get a chance to go to the playoff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly helps. I'm very interested to see what happens, as far as how many teams from, the non-Power 2 get into the playoff here. That's going to be what's interesting to watch, because obviously Florida State went 13-0, won the ACC and got left out of the party. I know the ACC champ will not be getting left out of the party going forward, but the real question is how many ACC schools, how many Big 12 schools are going to earn sort of those wild card berths, right? Are they going to be considered good enough, or are the SEC and Big Ten going to scoop all of those up? But to your point, I agree. I think certainly being the type of program that is contending for the ACC championship every single year and is really in the race to get into the playoff every year is going to help you. There's going to be, it's going to help attract more guys who say, you know what, I don't need to go sit on the bench for 2 years at Ohio State. I can go to Syracuse. I can go to Miami. I can get on the field faster and be a part of this thing. And I think it's going to help. It's definitely going to help some of the lower tier Power 5 non-traditional blue buds, I think, have a little bit more success.
Well, Manny, it's going to be fascinating to watch this all play out in the coming years because, as we all know, the changes ain't done coming to college football here, and they keep coming faster and more furious by the day. All right, Manny, thanks for hopping on for a few and shedding some insight. Great to chat today.
Great talking to you, too. Take care, man.
All right, there goes Manny Navarro. Check him out on The Athletic. I just thought it was really interesting reading his article today that his Recruiting Confidential he wrote with Grace Rayner. They asked a bunch of the guys at the Under Armour All-American game, of which King Joseph Edwards was participating, about, okay, well, what'd you get offered in NIL? Did you take the most NIL? Where'd you go? And NIL is a very off-the-record topic, right? When Scooter just called in last segment and said he's hearing the range on Kyle McCord is $600,000 to $4.2 million. I have not heard 4.2. I'm willing to cross the 4.2 off, but is Kyle making $600,000, $1.5 million? What's he getting? I don't know. I hear I've heard things, and yet I don't have the foggiest clue of what this guy's getting. So while we don't know the names attached to us, like the players that are at this Under Armour All-American game, and then there's the All-American Bowl coming up on Saturday, of which Marcellus Barnes, a top 3 guy for Syracuse, he'll be going to Cuse, Ole Miss, or Georgia. He'll be popping out on a hat on Saturday. Well, the Orange are now, we're paying attention to these things more than in previous times. There was the none. We paid attention to it before, and now there is some more than none. The numbers to these guys, like this is, and I get it. You're not. NIL is not for recruiting. We all know that's not true. It was fascinating to hear the numbers. Oh, I got 20 grand. I got 100 grand. It's 200 grand over 3 years. I got a signing bonus. I got a signing bonus that was the equivalent of a car. I was offered this money to come here on a visit. I was not offered money to come here on a visit. Whoa. And this is all legal enough. Like, I mean, it would have been against every rule 3 years ago. Well, now it's, it's technically against the rules. Hey, come on. It's not against the rules. It's not against the rules at all. It's exactly what is happening. And it's starting to get more and more light shined on it. And it's interesting. And man, they're 17-year-old kids that have to navigate this. Now, hopefully with the help of your parents and coaches and like 17-year-old kids, agent, like a lot of these guys have NIL agents now. Because I think a lot of the answers in there was, I relied on my agent. They're 17. They're relying on their agent to figure out their NIL so they can go to college. So then they can go to the transfer portal. So then they can get some more NIL. So then they can go to another college. So then they can hope make the NFL. Wow. It's a lot to figure out. It's a lot to figure out. What we need to figure out is a break. And this hour brought to you by William & Tarr. Hurt in a car, call William & Tarr. Phone lines open when we come back. 315-437-7644. Back after this on QSportsTalk.com and ESPN Radio.